Bonjour, welcome to the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very interesting topic. It's brain food, nutrition's role in reducing dementia risk. First, we would like to begin by acknowledging that the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging is located where our work is done on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kenyan Kehaka Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Jojia, commonly known as Montreal, is historically known as the gathering place for many Indigenous peoples. Today, it continues to be the home of a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future, and our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples we serve within the Montreal community and at large. In 2007, the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging Education Committee began the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series to suggest practical steps to both improve and maintain brain health, as well as to promote healthy lifestyle choices amongst the most populous generation in history. The MCSA Education Committee, founded in 1996, has three objectives. One, identifying education needs of healthcare providers, seniors, caregivers, the public, and developing responses to meet these needs. Two, enhancing the positive image of aging by addressing stereotypes, myths, and paradigms. And three, the dissemination of research on successful aging. Today, we are fortunate to have third-year McGill dietetic students from the School of Human Nutrition, Giddy Rand and Sarah Schultz. They are passionate about making nutrition practical and accessible. By exploring the connection between food, culture, and health, they aim to promote balancing eating in a way that supports overall well-being, including brain health and dementia prevention. So thank you so much for joining us today, Giddy and Sarah. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alexandra, for that kind introduction. So my name is Gitti, and as you said, I'm a third-year dietetics student at McGill University, dedicated to promoting healthier lifestyles through nutrition. I enjoy combining my nutritional knowledge with a genuine love for helping others. I love spending time with my many nieces and nephews, traveling, exploring new places, skiing, skating, and soaking up the outdoors. And I am excited to share practical nutrition tips to help reduce the risk of dementia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah, also a third-year dietetics student at McGill, and some of my other interests are I enjoy running, and I also have a love for music and animals, and I really appreciate the connection between food, health, and well-being. And also having personally seen the impact of dementia, I'm really excited to share how nutrition can support cognition and help reduce the risk of dementia.
So we are here with Mary Hendrickson, who is our supervisor and provided support in preparing this presentation. Okay, so we want this to be as interactive as possible. We would love if you could turn on your cameras. Feel free to raise your hand, use the reaction buttons, or type in the chat to respond to our questions. And we'll also have a Q&A session at the end, so keep your questions in mind. Now let's dive in. So brain food, preventing dementia through diet. So here's what we'll be covering today. First, we'll define what dementia is. Then we'll discuss risk factors. Next, we'll explore the role of nutrition in brain health. We'll highlight foods to prioritize and what to limit. And finally, we'll go over a quick summary. So before we begin, by a raise of hands, how many of you know someone who has experienced dementia? Yeah, so a couple of you. This isn't surprising as dementia is becoming increasingly common. According to the World Health Organization, 55 million people worldwide are currently living with dementia, and this number is expected to increase to 78 million by 2030 and 139 million by 2050. And in Canada, about 9% of adults over 65 have dementia. Even among those under 65, around 3% are affected. So this highlights why it's so important to focus on prevention. But what is dementia? Dementia is an umbrella term for cognitive decline, severe enough to interfere with daily life. It is not a single disease, but rather a set of symptoms caused by various brain disorders. So there are several types of dementia, including Alzheimer's disease, the most common, accounting for 60 to 80% of cases. There's vascular dementia, Lewy body, frontotemporal, Parkinson's disease dementia, mixed dementia, which is from more than one cause, and other. Each type has unique characteristics, but they all share progressive cognitive decline, affecting memory, reasoning, and daily functioning. While different types of dementia present with distinct characteristics and symptoms, they all involve progressive brain cell damage, leading to worsening cognitive and functional abilities over time. So this image compares a healthy brain to a brain affected by Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia. The Alzheimer's brain is visibly smaller due to brain atrophy, which is shrinkage, and the key areas affected include the hippocampus, responsible for memory, which shrinks significantly, ventricles, the fluid-filled spaces that enlarge as brain tissue is lost, the cortex, responsible for thinking, reasoning, and decision-making, becomes thinner. So that's the outer layer. And beta amyloid plaques and tau tangles build up in and between brain cells, causing decreased communication and cell death. These physical changes explain the symptoms seen in dementia. So does anyone know some signs and symptoms of dementia? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Memory loss, hard to understand others and to respond to others.
Yeah, those are all good ones. So we just named a few of these, but a couple other common symptoms are memory loss, as we mentioned. So for example, forgetting recent events, repeating questions, also difficulty doing familiar tasks, so trouble managing your bills or following recipes, problems with language, so struggling to follow a conversation or to join in, confusion with time or place, like losing track of dates or getting lost, having poor judgment, misplacing things like putting items in unusual spots, problems with abstract thinking, mood and personality changes. Often we see like increased anxiety, suspicion, loss of initiative, and trouble understanding visual or spatial information. But please remember that some changes in memory and cognition are a normal part of aging. So if you have concerns about yourself or a loved one, please consult a healthcare professional. Now let's take a look at what are the risk factors for dementia. These risk factors do not guarantee that you will develop the disease, but rather they indicate an increased likelihood of developing dementia. So risk factors can be classified as either modifiable or non-modifiable. Non-modifiable risk factors cannot be altered. For example, age and genetics. Risk increases with age, and family history plays a role. Or gender, women are at a higher risk than men. However, modifiable risk factors can be changed through our lifestyle choices, potentially reducing our risk. For example, smoking can increase the risk by 45%. Alcohol consumption, physical inactivity, diet, consuming unhealthy foods increases your risk, but a healthy, nutritious diet can have the opposite effect and support brain health. Lack of sleep and social isolation. Other risk factors can fall into either category depending on the cause. For example, head injuries, hearing loss, staying engaged with people protects brain health, low education. Formal education supports the development of a cognitive reserve, and lifelong learning strengthens your cognitive reserve.
All right. So now that we've talked about those risk factors for dementia with some that we can't change, like our age and genetics, but others like lifestyle, which includes our diet, are more in our control. So if we do a quick true or false, either a thumbs up for true or a thumbs down for false, there are specific dietary patterns that are proven to help reduce that risk of developing dementia. Yeah, so I see some thumbs up. So it is true. So two of the most well-researched diets for brain health are actually the Mediterranean diet that we have on the left and the DASH diet on the right. The Mediterranean diet is based on those traditional eating patterns from Greece, Italy, and Spain, which are regions that are known for having a long life expectancy and low rates of chronic disease. And the DASH diet stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. So originally this diet was created to help lower high blood pressure, but research also shows that it benefits brain health. So both of these diets really focus on whole, nutrient-rich foods like the ones that are pictured here to help protect the brain and reduce inflammation. But here's where we really get the best of both worlds. From these two diets, the Mediterranean and DASH diet, we get the MIND diet, specifically designed for brain health. So MIND diet stands for Mediterranean Dash Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay, which is quite the mouthful. Essentially, it combines best parts of both of these diets to protect the brain and reduce the risk of cognitive decline. So what does it include? Well, the MIND diet focuses on, at the top, we have our leafy greens and other vegetables. And then we have fatty fish and nuts. We have some whole grains, legumes, which includes beans, berries, poultry like fish, and then finally we have a focus of olive oil as an oil of choice. So how does this work? Well, following the MIND diet closely can actually slow cognitive aging by up to the equivalent of 7.5 years. Research shows that closely following the MIND diet can lower the risk of Alzheimer's by up to 53%. So the most common form of dementia, but even moderate changes show a decreased risk of up to 35%, which is still very significant. So the MIND diet improves memory and thinking skills when Alzheimer's disease-related changes have already started taking place, like that memory loss and thinking skills. So how does it help? Well, the MIND diet is packed with those brain-boosting foods that we just saw on the previous slide, and they help to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress to protect the brain. But what does this mean? Well, we're going to break it down further for you.
So let's start with neuroinflammation. What is it? Our brain has its own immune system with special cells called microglia that you see over here that act like security guards. And when they detect a threat, they release chemicals to protect the brain. This is helpful in the short term, but if they stay active for too long, like in chronic inflammation, they can actually harm brain cells instead of helping them. So neuroinflammation is a major factor in dementia because it contributes to the buildup of toxic proteins like amyloid beta and tau, which damage neurons and accelerate cognitive decline. The good news, research suggests we may be able to slow this process through lifestyle changes such as staying physically active or managing our stress and our diet. So that brings us to Canada's Food Guide. Canada's Food Guide acts as a funnel channeling key principles from the Mediterranean, DASH, and MIND diets into practical recommendations. It emphasizes whole plant-based foods, limits processed foods that are high in sodium and sugar, prioritizes healthy fats, and promotes mindful eating and cooking. In terms of food portions, the guide visually divides a balanced plate into half the plate to be broken down into vegetables and fruit, a quarter of the plate whole grains. So for example, choosing brown rice instead of white rice. And the last quarter to be plant-based protein primarily. So first up, and the biggest portion of our plate is vegetables and fruit. The MIND diet recommends eating leafy greens 1 or more times per day. So think spinach, kale, or lettuce. It also says to have other vegetables 1 or more times per day. So bright colored vegetables like peppers, carrots, and cruciferous ones like broccoli or cauliflower. And to include in your fruit, berries at least 2 servings per week, such as blueberries, strawberries, or blackberries. But why does this matter? These foods are rich in antioxidants, phytochemicals, and fiber, which play a huge role in protecting the brain. But how do they work? Let's take a closer look. So our brain cells are constantly under attack from free radicals, as you could see in this picture. They're unstable molecules that damage healthy cells and contribute to neurodegeneration. They cause oxidative stress, increasing the risk of dementia and other cognitive diseases. Brain cells become damaged over time, leading to memory loss and cognitive decline. But how do antioxidants help? So they neutralize free radicals, protecting brain cells from damage. Some antioxidants are made naturally, but many come from food sources like fruits, vegetables, and nuts. These foods also contain phytochemicals, which are naturally occurring plant-based chemicals and are what give fruits and vegetables their vibrant color. Why are they important? Because they have antioxidant properties. They protect cells from that free radical damage. And many also have anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective properties, helping to preserve memory and cognitive function. So eating a variety of plant-based foods ensures we get a wide range of these powerful compounds to support overall health, including brain function. Let's do another true or false. Give me a thumbs up or down. So the color of a fruit or vegetable can give clues about the type of phytochemicals it contains. Robin?
Yes.
Okay,
No.
great. Yeah, so the answer is true. Different pigments are linked to specific phytochemicals. So have you ever heard the phrase eat the rainbow? The colors in our food can actually indicate the phytochemicals and antioxidants. On this slide, we have 6 categories of phytochemicals that color our fruit and vegetables and are also antioxidants. So rich red-colored vegetables and fruit contain lycopene. Beta carotene found in sweet potatoes, carrots, mango, and turmeric colors the fruit or vegetable orange or yellow. For leafy greens, the darker the greens, the more packed they are with chlorophyll. Anthocyanins have a dark purple, blue, or red color, such as blueberries or raspberries, that are great because they increase blood flow to the brain and help reduce inflammation. And as we know, chronic inflammation is linked to dementia. Anthocyanins are found in white vegetables and fruit, like onions, cauliflower, and bananas. And some other polyphenols are tea, dark chocolate, herbs, and spices. So by incorporating a variety of these colorful vegetables and fruit, we can help protect our brains from oxidative stress and inflammation, reducing the risk of dementia and supporting long-term cognitive health.
All right, so next up on our plate is protein. So at every meal, protein should make up about a quarter of your plate, and protein sources can come from one, like legumes, nuts, and seeds, which are some plant-based sources, also meat, poultry, or fish, and then a third category is dairy products. So for protein, the MIND diet specifically emphasizes at least 5 servings per week of nuts or seeds, at least 4 servings per week of beans or legumes, and then at least 2 servings per week of poultry, like chicken, and then at least 1 serving per week of a fatty fish like salmon. So there's definitely a really big focus on those plant proteins. So what's the difference between our animal-based and our plant-based proteins? Well, it's exactly like it sounds. So on our left, we have our protein sources that come from animals, so eggs, dairy, meat, and seafood. And then from the MIND diet specifically, we have that fish and poultry. And then on the right, we have our plant-based sources like the legumes, nuts, and seeds, and then grains like quinoa and buckwheat, and then also tofu, edamame, and other soy products, which are a great source of protein as well. So now that we've just seen that comparison of the animal and plant proteins, let's do another true false. So thumbs up, true, down for false. Animal and plant-based proteins provide the same benefits for the prevention of dementia. I think I see some thumbs up and okay, I see some both thumbs up and some thumbs down. So this is false, some thumbs down. So plant proteins like those beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds are actually linked to a greater reduction in dementia risk than those animal proteins. So it's actually been found that replacing just 5% of your daily calories from carbohydrates, so that would be like bread, rice, and pasta, with a plant protein lowered dementia risk by 26% versus with replacing it with animal protein reduces the risk of dementia by 11%. So the MIND diet really puts a focus on those plant proteins while including also fatty fish and lean proteins like that poultry for a balanced approach to brain health. But let's talk about affordability. So overall protein are the most expensive food group that we purchase, but there are some great ways to get your protein in without breaking the bank. So our first tip is to choose those plant-based proteins more often. So beans, lentils, and tofu are much more affordable options than meat. And also opting for canned options, if available, is also a great way to get the same protein and the same nutrient benefits in for a lot less. So we have like canned tuna, canned sardines, canned salmon are much more budget friendly than fresh fish, but a great way to get your weekly consumption in. And canned salmon is widely produced in Canada, so that's a bonus. And we also have our buy in bulk. So a lot of those plant-based dried beans, lentils, and nuts, but then also canned fish are cheaper in larger quantities and have a long shelf life. And then finally, we have our eggs, which are a classic and affordable source of high quality protein and nutrients that are budget friendly. So beyond protein, while protein is an essential nutrient, certain proteins like fish, nuts, seeds, and even omega-3 eggs don't just provide protein, they also contain omega-3s, which are a healthy fat that is essential for brain health. So before we get into omega-3s, we have a multiple choice question. You can either write your answer in the chat or unmute yourself. So it's what percentage of the brain do you think is made up of fat? So we have either 25%, 40%, 60%, or 80% as our options. So I see 25%, 40. All right. So the answer to this is actually 60%. So our brain is actually the fattiest organ in our entire body, which is why omega-3s are so important for the brain. So omega-3s are essential for brain health and they play many important roles. So first, they help to support brain cell structure and function. So they keep our brain cells healthy and connected. And then they also have anti-inflammatory effects. So reduce inflammation and help slow down that brain cell death, protecting us from cognitive decline. And then finally, they can even help to improve early memory and learning deficiencies related to aging. So they're a key player in maintaining cognitive health over our lifetime. So now that we know some of the brain benefits of omega-3s, where can we get them in our diet? So we have three different groups of omega-3s. We have DHA and EPA, and then ALA. So DHA and EPA will group together, and those are commonly found in seafood. So our salmon, tuna, mackerel, and sardines are a great source of omega-3. And then we also have specifically our omega-3 eggs, which are a great source. And then for ALA, that comes from our plant sources, so flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, and algae. And then plant oils like canola oil and flaxseed oil are also great choices to boost our omega-3 intake. So here we have our first of three recipes for today. It's a relatively simple one. It's our berry chia jam. So it's prepared exactly like normal jam, but with chia seeds added. So first, those chia seeds are our source of omega-3s. And then for our recipe, we used frozen wild blueberries, which actually have the highest antioxidant levels of all fruits and vegetables. So that's an added plus is that they're often grown in Canada. Canada is actually one of the world's largest producers of those wild blueberries. And the total cost of this recipe was $5.34 to $5.58, but it produces one whole cup of jam, which if one serving is about a tablespoon, it should give you about 16 servings, which is only 33 cents per portion. So it's quite an affordable option. And this recipe also has great versatility. Either it works great with any berries alone or mixed, and you can use frozen or fresh berries as well. So here we have our recipe video. So first thing, we're going to want to wash our hands before handling any of our foods. And next we can prepare our ingredients. So we have our chia seeds, our frozen berries, our honey, our lemon zest, our lemon juice, and our vanilla. And first thing on adding to a pot on medium heat, we can add our berries, our honey, and then we can also add our lemon zest here. And then finally, we can add our lemon juice and then our vanilla. So For about 15 minutes on the heat, we're going to stir frequently. And after 15 minutes, it should look about like this. Then you can just mash your jam with a fork until your desired consistency is achieved. And then remove it straight from the heat and let it cool slightly. Once it's cooled slightly, you can add and stir in the chia seeds, just stirring it to make sure that they're well mixed in your jam. And it should look like that. And then after that, right away, you can transfer your jam to a glass container and let it cool completely, or enjoy immediately. And if you're saving it for later, make sure to seal it and refrigerate until use. All right, so third on our healthy plate is grains, but specifically whole grains. So like protein, whole grains should make up about a quarter of your plate. So whole grains are recommended both by the Canadian Food Guide and by the Mind Diet, as they contain more nutrients than those refined grains. And those nutrients are namely fiber, but also B vitamins and antioxidants. Why? Well, as we can see on the image on the lower right, those whole grains are left intact with what is called the bran and the germ, while refined grains contain only what is called the endosperm. So it removes a lot of those healthy nutrients like that fiber, B vitamins, and antioxidants, which is why the Mind Diet recommends having at least 3 servings per day of those whole grains. So let's talk about fiber. Fiber is a type of carbohydrate that's found in plant foods that your body can't fully digest, but it still plays a crucial role in supporting overall health, especially brain health. So first off, fiber helps keep your gut microbiome healthy, which is what communicates with your brain and can influence how your brain functions. Then second, it helps to reduce inflammation. So fiber intake is associated with lower levels of inflammation, which is beneficial since chronic inflammation can negatively affect our brain health over time. And then specifically for dementia, studies show that a higher fiber intake is actually linked to a lower risk of developing dementia. So eating more fiber helps protect your brain in the long run. But just how much fiber do we need? So on average, men need about 38 grams of fiber per day, while women need on average about 25 grams per day. But most people only get half or less than half of the requirement with approximately 14 grams of fiber per day because we're really lacking those key sources of fiber in our diet. So where can we find those best fiber-rich sources? So we have our whole grains, as we just saw earlier, that are a fantastic source. So think our whole wheat products like oats, quinoa, and many more. And then we also have fruits and vegetables, which are packed with fiber. So including a variety of fruits and vegetables in your diet can help you reach your fiber requirement. And then, of course, our plant-based sources of protein, like the legumes and the nuts and seeds, are also a great source of fiber. Realistically, though, it can be difficult to apply a lot of these changes to our diet to get more fiber. So let's go through a few great tips on how to make it easier. So one, choosing whole grain products like that whole grain pasta, brown rice, bread, and flour will help to boost that fiber intake compared to their white versions. So a quick example on the right is we have a cup of rice. So a cup of white rice contains only 0.6 grams of fiber versus a cup of brown rice contains 3.5 grams of fiber. And then a second tip is really simple. It's just a matter of keeping the skins on fruits and vegetables when they're edible. So on the right, again, we have an image of an apple without the peel, which has 2.1 grams of fiber. But when you leave the peel on, it has over double the amount of fiber with 4.4 grams. And then a third tip, also simple, is to add legumes. So including beans, lentils, and peas in soups, salads, or really any recipe you can think of is a really simple way to boost the fiber content of those meals, but then also make them more filling. But be aware to start slowly. So adding 1 serving of fiber containing food at a time in your diet so that your gut bacteria has the time to adjust to digesting that increase in fiber. And then also ensuring adequate fluid intake. Without adequate fluid intake, the fiber can sometimes lead to more constipation if we're not drinking enough. So let's practice. For this one, feel free to either unmute yourself or write it in the chat. So here we have a plain bowl of yogurt. And based off everything we've seen, what are some foods that you think you'd like to add to this bowl of yogurt to increase the amount of fiber and make it a more filling snack.
So someone's writing frozen berries, chia and flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, fruits, chia seeds.
Yeah, those are all great options. So if we go on, yeah, so fruits, chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts. So if we go on our bowl that we created, we have a lot of those included in the one we made. So we have berries. So we included blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, but any fruit will help give a boost in fiber. And then nuts like walnuts, we also have in our bowl, but seeds are a great option too, like those flax seeds and chia seeds. And then oats are also a great way to boost the fiber. So here we have our second recipe, our 3-bean quinoa salad. So this dish is relatively cost effective at $2.36 per portion, but it also brings that beautiful balance to our plate. So we have all the components that we've talked about so far. So we have a mix of our vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. So we have a variety of our colorful and nutrient-rich vegetables, including our green beans. We have bell peppers, cucumbers, tomatoes, red onion, Kalamata olives, and basil, which each of these helps to provide a boost in fiber and antioxidants. And then we also have our plant-based protein source, being our chickpeas and white beans, but you can really use any legumes that you'd like. And then we have finally our quinoa, which is our whole grain, which we use half a cup of, which is a fantastic source of protein and fiber. So here we have our recipe video for our 3-bean quinoa salad. So start with cooking the quinoa. Be sure to rinse the quinoa with under cool running water. This can help to actually get rid of some of the bitter taste that quinoa can have due to the coating. And then once that's done, we can add our water and quinoa at the same time to a medium saucepan. And then we're going to want to make sure we put that on high heat to bring it to a boil. And then once it's boiling, we can cover it and reduce the heat to low and let it simmer for 15 minutes. So once it's been about 15 minutes, we remove it from the heat and let it stand for about 5 minutes. And then once that's up, we can remove the lid and fluff it with a fork. Next, you can prepare the remaining ingredients. So for the legumes, make sure to rinse all the legumes, our chickpeas and white beans. That can help to get rid of some of the sodium that is left over in the cans. And then also washing our vegetables thoroughly under fresh, cool running water can help remove any bacteria, dirt, or pesticides that are left over. So here we have all of our ingredients. Starting at the top, we have our red pepper, our grape tomatoes, our yellow pepper, our green beans, our fresh basil, cucumber, and our Kalamata olives, and then red onion. And lastly, we have our legumes being our white beans and chickpeas. So we're really eating a rainbow with this meal. And then we have our quinoa that we cooked earlier. So if we assemble our salad, add first the quinoa as our base to the bowl, and then you can add your prepared ingredients in any order. There's no method to this, just adding to the bowl. And then finally, we want to prepare our dressing. A really good tip is to prepare it in a mason jar, which makes it really easy to both prepare and then store it for later use if you prepare some extra. So here are all our ingredients for the dressing. So first, we're going to add our olive oil, and we have our balsamic vinegar, our sliced or minced garlic, and then we also are going to add a pinch of dried oregano and a pinch of dried basil. And then we can shake up our dressing in our mason jar, which makes it really easy. And once that's done, just pour it on top of the salad and make sure to give it a mix to evenly coat all of the ingredients. Then we can finish with some crumpled feta on top and salt and pepper to taste and give it a final mix. And once that's done, our salad is ready to enjoy, and this recipe can easily be doubled and you can store the remaining for later. And now the final part of our healthy plate is fluids. So what should we be drinking? Well, water should be our drink of choice as it's the best way to stay hydrated and then also keep our brains functioning at their best. So, proper hydration is really essential for brain function. Even mild dehydration can impact memory, mood, and focus. Not everyone loves plain water and it can get a bit boring. So, if that's you, try adding some fruit like lemon, berries, or cucumber for a little extra healthy flavor boost. Okay, and what about tea and coffee? So, tea and coffee are great options to supplement your fluid intake after water. So, both are packed with antioxidants that help to protect our brain from that free radical damage. Tea is especially rich in polyphenols, which is a type of antioxidant we saw. So whether it's green or black, hibiscus, it's definitely a delicious way to support your brain health. Just be mindful for both the tea and coffee to limit the amount of added sugar and cream and milk that's being used. And remember to enjoy in moderation. So according to Health Canada guidelines, aiming for less than 400 milligrams of caffeine or about 4 to 5 cups of coffee per day, as overconsumption of caffeine can cause some side effects like restlessness or increased heart rate, sleep disruption, among many other side effects as well.
Now, what about drinks and foods to limit? So let's start with alcohol. Canada's updated low-risk alcohol guidelines from 2023 are all about caution and moderation when it comes to drinking. So ultimately, no consumption of alcohol is optimal to provide zero risk to one's health. It is recommended to have no more than 1 to 2 drinks per week for both men and women to reduce the risk of alcohol-related consequences. Essentially, the more you drink, the higher the health-related risks. So you could get liver disease, cancer, mental health issues, and cognitive decline. Now, what about foods to limit? So in general, we want to limit ultra-processed foods. These foods are usually packed with added salt, sugar, fats, and other additives, and lose their original nutrients along the way. We could think of processed food like a spectrum. First, we have unprocessed or minimally processed foods. Think fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, poultry, seafood, eggs, and milk. We want to make these foods the basis of our diet. Next, we have processed foods. So when ingredients such as oil, sugar, or salt are added to foods and they're packaged, the result is processed foods. Some examples include bread, cheese, tofu, and canned tuna or beans. These foods have been altered, but not in a way that's detrimental to health. So they are convenient and help you build nutritious meals more easily. And finally, we have ultra processed foods. So this is the category we want to stay away from. These foods go through multiple processes and contain many added ingredients. And some examples are soft drinks, chips, candy, sweetened breakfast cereals, fries, and many more. So as an example, first in its true unprocessed form is the fresh fruit, an apple. And minimally processed would be dehydrated apple chips and applesauce, still close to the original and considered healthy and nutritious. Highly processed options would be apple juice and apple cereal, which is altered further, containing additives and losing many of its original nutrients. And finally, ultra processed could include apple flavored candy, which doesn't resemble the apple in look or taste. Along the way, the apple was altered through processing, impacting its content. Now, for a quick true or false, Canadians consume nearly 50% of all their calories from ultra-processed foods. Thumbs up or down?
I hope it's false.
I see it true. We hope it's false. Yeah. So it actually is true,
Wow.
unfortunately. 46.8% of all calories Canadians consume come from ultra-processed foods. So one example, instead of reaching for a granola bar, which is an ultra-processed food, you could grab some homemade energy balls from the freezer that could be a healthier version. So this brings us to our third recipe, pumpkin energy bites, which are a delicious nutrient-packed snack. Their total recipe cost is $5.49, and each ball costs 54 cents. And for two, it's $1.10. So this is a cheaper alternative than your typical granola bar. For some nutritional highlights, two balls is 9.7 grams of fiber. So that's a lot. And it has antioxidants from pumpkin and omega-3s from flax seeds, so all supporting brain health. These bites are perfect for on the go. So here is the recipe video. So first you're going to want to wash your hands before starting to prepare them, and prepare all your ingredients on the counter. Get your cocoa, coconut flakes, oats, ginger, cinnamon, salt, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, pumpkin puree, and pitted dates ready. And then you're going to add the pitted dates to the blender or a food processor. They're full of fiber. Just be careful of the blades for safety. And here is the pumpkin puree with its bright orange color. So it has the antioxidant beta carotene, which will help fight the free radicals. Next is the pumpkin seeds, the oats, and the cinnamon, ginger, and a pinch of salt. So you're going to turn it on. And the consistency that we are looking for is this at the end. And before you roll the balls, you're going to want to wash your hands really well. And you're trying to get a 1-inch ball. So roll it between your hands and then coat it in the coating of your choice. So here we chose to coat it in coconut flakes. And the next one we chose cocoa. You could also choose crushed nuts, or just having it plain is also an option. And then for storage, you could put it in the fridge for 2 hours until they firm up. But for longer storage, you could keep it in the freezer. And this recipe makes 10 balls. And if you want more, you could always double or triple the recipe. But a key consideration is to remember that many processed foods are healthy and contain the same nutrients we saw today, including antioxidants, omega-3s, and fiber. So from frozen fruits and vegetables to canned foods, these products go through processing, but are nutritious foods to include in your brain healthy diet. To wrap up, proper nutrition plays a key role in cognitive health and dementia prevention. The foods we eat can protect our brain, support memory, and reduce long-term risk. So by following Canada's food guide and including omega-3s, antioxidants, and high-fiber foods, we can work towards a brain healthier diet. By choosing simple, affordable, and nutrient-dense options, we can fuel our minds for a healthier future, because eating for brain health shouldn't be complicated. It should be easy, delicious, and empowering. Now it's your turn. Can anyone help me fill up this plate for supper with Canada's food guide and the Mind diet in mind? Let's start with the vegetables and fruit.
Broccoli,
Perfect. How much of the plate would you cover with broccoli?
what, 1/4 of the plate.
So the suggestion, so either we could do a quarter of that type of broccoli, and then we could choose another type of vegetable for the other quarter, because the recommendation is to fill half of our plate with fruits and vegetables. So that's a
Okay.
great suggestion.
Spinach, épinard.
Spinach, yeah, exactly. And then for the grain, does anyone have a suggestion?
Brown rice,
Yeah. How much of the plate should that cover?
1/4.
Exactly. And now for the protein option?
Salmon,
Yeah. And something to drink?
tea.
Water.
Exactly. So this is what we came up with. Salmon as the protein, basmati rice, and a large salad filled with vegetables like tomatoes, cucumbers, broccoli, and cauliflower. And then add a few berries for dessert, and to drink, you can have water and tea. Now, some resources were Canada's Food Guide, the Alzheimer's Society of Canada. You could visit 211 to get information on local food banks and community kitchens. And if you want more nutrition information, you could look at the MCSA's YouTube channel. The link is below. And thank you so much for listening. And here's our references.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
I just wanted to thank Sarah and Giddy for completing their community stage at our organization, the Italian Canadian Community Services. And we've been partnering with McGill and with the McGill Center for Studies in Aging for many years to bring these presentations, these lectures to the community. So thank you and very well done. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you at our next Brainy Boomer lecture. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.